Welcome to DrowsyTeller. If you found your way here, it means you've already started asking the kinds of questions most people are too afraid to voice. The ones that linger just beyond the edges of sleep. The ones that make silence feel heavier. This is a place for stories that don't fit neatly into headlines or textbooks. A place where the shadows speak and forgotten places remember. Here, we walk the narrow path between reality and rumor, where the line between once upon a time and it happened is thin and always shifting. Tonight, we turn our attention not to a haunted house or a remote forest, but to something much quieter, much closer. A hotel, elegant, historic, and absolutely wrong. They say it's just old, that the skipped room numbers are a superstition, that the voices guests sometimes hear are just plumbing or dreams. But dreams don't leave tapes behind. What follows is a journal, an audio record, one that was never meant to be found. It's been framed as fiction, but before you press play, ask yourself one thing. What if it isn't? Take a breath, let the quiet settle in, and listen. Room 119. The first night I started recording wasn't meant to be anything more than a way to pass the time. I had no intention of keeping a journal, and I wasn't interested in hearing myself talk. I just needed a voice, any voice, to fill the space between the ticking of the lobby clock and the hum of the vending machine. This old tape recorder had been sitting in my closet since college. I brought it with me when I started the night shift at the Marrow House, thinking maybe I'd use it to make some audio notes. Never thought I'd start talking to it like a friend. The Marrow House stands like a forgotten tooth at the edge of town, tall, stone-faced, and untouched by modern hands. They call it a heritage hotel, which is just another way of saying it's too expensive to renovate and too haunted to demolish. The place was built in 1932 on the ruins of something older. No one seems to remember exactly what. The owners keep it just alive enough to rent out rooms to businessmen on conferences, writers on retreats, and the occasional couple chasing the gothic romance fantasy. No one stays long. The lobby is cold in ways that radiators can't fix. High ceilings, deep red carpets patterned like veins, sconces that flicker like they're tired of holding light. The front desk is made of dark wood that drinks your reflection. Behind it, the wall of keys hangs like a graveyard of numbers. I've always liked the quiet, so when I got offered the night shift, 11 to 7, 5 nights a week, I took it without hesitation. No guests to deal with after midnight. No traffic on the street, just me, the building, and time. That first shift passed slowly. The computer glitched during check-ins. The elevator door stuttered like it had a stammer, and the radiator in room 112 made a low, wet, breathing sound. I logged maintenance notes with the usual attention to detail, then poured myself a cup of bitter coffee from the staff lounge. It tasted like burnt cardboard. It always does. By 3, everything was still. I made rounds with the security flashlight, just to keep from falling asleep. Nothing strange, nothing broken, nothing out of place. But when I returned to the front desk, I noticed something odd. A sound, faint but distinct, coming from the west hallway. At first I thought it was the plumbing. This building groans and hisses like it's got secrets to whisper. But this wasn't that. It was softer, rhythmic, voices, conversational tones muffled by layers of old plaster. I followed the noise. Slow steps, careful not to echo. The hallway was dim, lit only by the glow of green exit signs and the warm bleed of sconces spaced too far apart. Room numbers glinted as I passed 115, 116, 117, 118, and then 120. I stopped. I turned around. There was no room 119. I walked back. My steps slowed, uncertain. 117, 118, wall, then 120. No door, no plaque, just a narrow stretch of wallpaper with a vertical seam, as though someone had peeled off history and stitched it shut. The voices had stopped. I stood there for what felt like minutes, staring at the blank wall, listening for another syllable, a breath, anything. Nothing came. I pressed my palm against the wallpaper. It was cold, colder than the air around it, almost damp. I knocked once. The sound echoed dull and short, like something absorbing it from the other side. I returned to the front desk, unsettled. I sat. I didn't write anything down. I just pressed the record button on the tape deck. 3:24 a.m., Tuesday. Heard what I thought was conversation. 2 voices, one male, one female, coming from the West Hall. But there's no room 119. Check the layout twice. Jump from 18 to 20. Could have been a vent. Could have been sound leakage, but it didn't feel like it. The rest of the shift passed in silence. No guests called down. No alarms tripped. Just the lobby clock ticking out, time like a patient executioner. At 7, I handed the desk over to Gloria, the day manager. She looked at me with her usual disinterest, flipping through the guest book with the bored fingers of someone used to monotony. I thought about asking her if she ever noticed anything strange about that hallway, but I didn't. Something in me resisted. Instead, I nodded, left through the back, and stepped into the gray slush of the parking lot, the sky still colorless. Later that morning, in the half-sleep before dreams, I remembered something. When I passed room 118 on the way back from the wall, I saw a light under the door. Not strange on its own. Some guests leave bathroom lights on, but I remember that light pulsed, like a candle, like flickering film. I don't know if I imagined it or if it was the hallway reflecting something that wasn't there. I'll check again tonight, just in case. End of recording. The following night began with rain, not the kind that gently taps the windows and makes you feel cozy, but a cold metallic drizzle that slid down the lobby's tall glass like sweat down a nervous back. It made the air inside heavier, like the storm was pressing its weight against the walls, testing the structure. I sat behind the desk, flipping through the guest ledger out of habit. The pages were clean, too clean. The Marrow house had 24 occupied rooms tonight. Room numbers 101 through 1. 24, skipping over the same invisible space between 18 and 20. I found myself staring at that gap in the column longer than I should have. At 2:15, I made my first walkthrough. The hallways were still. Every surface seemed to absorb sound. The carpet muted my steps. The wallpaper drank in the quiet. I passed 115, then 16. I slowed at 18. The light was off this time. No candle flicker under the door. The brass numbers glowed faintly under the overhead bulb. When I turned to face the wall where 19 should have been, it was just as I remembered. Blank wallpaper, faint seam, slight bulge like the wall had been hastily patched over. Still, I knocked. 3 soft taps, no answer, no voices. I pressed my ear against the surface, the warmth of my skin meeting the cold of plaster. At first, nothing. Then, just at the edge of hearing, movement. Not footsteps, not speech. The shifting weight of something repositioning itself. Fabric brushing against fabric. A chair leg scraping wood. The unmistakable click of a switch. I stepped back. I checked the floor plan next. Not the printed emergency exit map mounted near the elevator. That one conveniently skipped the odd-numbered side of the hallway altogether. I meant the original architectural blueprint, framed in the staff office behind the lobby. The glass was dusty, the frame crooked, but the layout was clear. I ran my finger along the west wing, 117, 118, and then in faded, almost ghostly ink. 119. Not bolded like the others. Not outlined, almost erased. I pressed my finger harder, as if touch might restore it. That's when I heard her. A guest, maybe mid-60s, wrapped in a plaid shawl and clutching a paperback novel, approached the front desk. She asked for a tea bag, chamomile, if we had it. I apologized and offered her a peppermint instead. As I turned to fetch it from the supply drawer, she said, almost offhand, "Did they finally finish the renovation in 119? My hand froze. When I turned back, I asked her to repeat herself. She gave a puzzled smile and clarified, "Room 119. I always thought it odd they kept it sealed. It used to be the reading room, I think, or maybe an office. Always smelled like pipe tobacco." I told her politely that there was no such room, that the numbering skipped from 18 to 20. Her smile faded a little, like a small light dimming behind the eyes. She looked at the floor, then back at me. "I could have sworn." She took the peppermint and shuffled away, toward the elevator, her slippers scuffing softly against the tiles. I watched her go, that uneasy stillness growing thicker in the space she left behind. At 3 o'clock, I returned to the hallway. The wallpaper over the gap looked darker than before, slightly damp at the edges, like it had begun to breathe. I stood there again, not knocking this time, just listening. The air was still, but the silence wasn't empty. It pressed inward, like standing in a vacuum that remembers sound. There was a shift, a whisper. Not a word, not a sentence. Just a soft breath exhaled an inch too close to my ear. I turned sharply. No one. Later, I searched the digital booking system, hoping to find some anomaly. It's a slow, clunky interface. The records go back to 2014. Everything seems in order, except for one curious entry in the maintenance logs, dated February 12, 2015. Door removed, wall sealed, room reclassified. No explanation, no staff name, no signature. Highlighted the line, copied it. But the system crashed as I tried to paste it into my notes. When it rebooted, the entry was gone. At 4:17, the lobby phone rang once. No one on the line, just static. And underneath it, just barely, a low murmur. My name, I think, but not spoken. Exhaled. I didn't record that night's audio until I got home. I didn't want the recorder hearing something I couldn't explain. But I'll bring it tomorrow. If the wall speaks again, I want proof. I need to know if the room I can't see is watching me. End of recording. I brought the recorder with me tonight. Left it running under the desk from the moment my shift began. I don't know what I expected it to catch. Maybe the hum of the old vending machine, or the whine of the elevator motor when it hits the 4th floor too hard. But I also know what I hoped it might catch. Something else. Something from that wall. The building seemed more restless tonight. The rain had stopped, but the air held the weight of it, like moisture trapped in the walls, was now pressing inward. A few lights in the hallway had begun to flicker unpredictably. One near the linen closet sparked twice, and then went dark completely. I logged it for maintenance, though I doubt anyone will fix it soon. The owners like to call that sort of thing atmosphere. At 2:41, I heard them again. I was restocking the coffee station. Plastic stirrers, powdered creamer, sugar packets in neat rows, when the sound reached me from down the hall. It was clearer this time. 2 voices, a man and a woman. The cadence was unmistakable, a question, a reply, a pause, then laughter. It wasn't the distorted kind you get through piping or radio interference. It was conversation. Lively, specific, real. I stepped into the west corridor, letting the flashlight beam cut across the worn carpet. The wallpaper along the hall was slightly peeled at the edges, and the seam where 119 should be was even more visible tonight. I followed, the sound carefully, not wanting it to disappear again. The voices stopped the moment I reached the blank stretch of wall. I stood very still. Then slowly, I leaned closer. Nothing. I knocked once, soft, tentative. Then a voice answered. Not a full sentence, just one word. Don't. A whisper. Female. And closer than I expected. I took a step back, heart kicking in my ribs like it wanted out. The hallway behind me was empty. I turned in a slow circle, flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. I scanned every corner, every doorframe. Nothing. Back at the desk, I replayed the last 30 minutes of the tape. Static, soft hum, the occasional shuffle of my footsteps. Then, faintly, around the 24-minute mark, the conversation. Hard to make out, but it was there. And then, as clear as my own breath, don't. The word etched itself into the tape like a blade. At 3:30, a guest from room 115 came to the front desk. She looked tired. Hair up in a messy twist, one slipper, half falling off her foot. She asked if someone had checked in late. I said, no. No late arrivals tonight. She frowned. Must have been the TV next door. I heard people talking, arguing, I think. And music. You know those old jazz records, like from the 40s? I told her the room beside hers was vacant. She blinked a few times. I'm sorry, what? 117's empty, I repeated. And there's no room between 18 and 20. She stared at me for a moment too long, then nodded, not believing me. When she left, I walked over to the wall map again. The same architectural plan from the 30s. I hadn't noticed it before, but near the edge of the blueprint, drawn lightly in pencil, was a square labeled Session Room 2. It sat directly behind the space that should be 119. I searched the staff binder for old documents, found a sheet yellowed with age, stamped Internal Use Only, dated 1957, a list of office conversions, storage closets, retired medical, rooms, and something marked Isolation Suite 119, transferred. Transferred where? The hall was silent again by 4, but the wall felt alive. I can't explain it better than that. It wasn't that it was breathing, it was remembering. When I leaned close once more, I heard something I hadn't expected. My name. Spoken slowly. Not like a threat, like a question. Ethan. The voice wasn't frightened or angry. It sounded familiar. I turned off the recorder, just for a second, just to sit in the silence and think. What if I never turned it back on? What if the wall remembers better than I do? I haven't left yet. It's 5:12 now. The clock behind the desk is ticking backwards again. I've checked twice. The second hand moves smooth as water, but in reverse. I don't think it's broken. I think it's following something else. I'm going back down the hall one more time before dawn. I'll leave the recorder running. If it speaks again, maybe it'll say more. End of recording. I recognized the man the moment he stepped through the doors, though I was sure we'd never met. He arrived just after 1, coat still damp from the drizzle, suitcase worn smooth at the edges like it had traveled too far for too long. He moved with the deliberate care of someone who had rehearsed this exact moment 100 times before. Glancing left, then right, then directly to the front desk, with a look not of curiosity but confirmation. His eyes were pale, watery, the kind that carried too many images and no rest between them. I greeted him, asked for his name. Arthur Vale, he said, placing an old-fashioned leather wallet on the counter. Inside was a faded ID card that looked more like a train pass than a driver's license. He didn't offer a credit card, didn't even seem to expect to pay. I asked which room he'd reserved. 119. I looked up. Sorry, I said. We don't have a room 119. That number doesn't exist. He stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, his eyes not leaving mine. That's not right, he said. I've always stayed there since... He blinked hard. Since before they changed it. I asked him if he meant room 120. I even offered to give him the corner suite for the same rate. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back from the counter, glanced down the west hallway as if expecting to see something at the end of it. Then, without another word, he picked up his suitcase and walked out through the same doors he had just entered. I stood there frozen. When I returned to the desk, something was resting on the counter where he had stood. A photograph. Black and white, glossy, a little curled at the edges. It showed the lobby of the Marrow House, clearly taken decades ago. No date written, no markings on the back. The furnishings were different. No vending machine, no guest computer, no energy-efficient bulbs. Just a lobby soaked in shadows, with thick curtains and polished floors. Behind, the front desk, mounted on the key wall, were rows of numbered brass hooks, and in the center of the image, clear and distinct, a key labeled 119. I took the photo and held it near the wall map in the office, comparing the architectural design to what I now held in my hand. The key wall hadn't changed. The positions were identical. The number had once been real. Later, I brought the photo to the guest lounge. There's an antique mirror hanging there, bronzed at the corners, cracked slightly in the frame. I held the photo up to it, trying to look at it from another angle. In the reflection, the number 119 on the key tag was missing. The brass hook was still there, but it was empty. No tag, no key. I blinked, looked back down. In my hand, the number remained. I checked again, in the mirror, gone. I spent the next hour going through old registries in the archive room behind the office. The logs are incomplete, handwritten, stained with age. I found one, dated April 21st, 1962. Among the guests listed in cramped script was Arthur Vale, or 119. The ink was faded, but the name was there. No checkout date recorded. 3 lines below his entry, someone had drawn a diagonal slash through the page, a crude X. Beneath it, a short note in pencil. Do not reassign. The same night, Room 115 reported a complaint. This time, it was the radio. A melody had played for nearly 30 minutes just past 3 a.m., drifting through the wall from an empty room. A crackling jazz tune, like something off a scratched vinyl. I checked every occupied room. No one had a radio, no one had music on. In the west hallway, I listened again at the seam in the wall. There was no sound, no static. But something was different. The temperature had changed. The air was cooler, yes, but also stiller. Like the hallway was being held in place, as if the molecules themselves were pausing in anticipation. I touched the wallpaper. It pulsed. Not like breathing. Like response. Back at the desk, I reviewed the audio from earlier. I had left the recorder running after Vale left. At timestamp 42 minutes, 20 seconds, there was a sound, barely perceptible. A door opening, footsteps, a key turning in a lock, and then the soft, unmistakable click of a doorknob engaging. Room 119 had been opened, but by whom? I played it again, louder. This time I noticed something else. Before the door opened, there was a voice. It wasn't Vale, it wasn't me, it was a woman. She said, "He's back." I haven't seen Arthur Vale again. His name wasn't in the system. The login terminal showed no entry. The front door camera froze between 1:01 and 1:02 a.m. A glitch I didn't notice until hours later. But the photo remains. The key, marked 119, still visible in my hand, and invisible in the mirror. I don't know who he was, or why he came, but someone was waiting for him, inside that room. A room we no longer have, or never stopped having. End of recording. Didn't decide to find the door. I simply found myself standing in front of it. It was a little after 2. The hotel was asleep, its usual nocturnal rhythm. Soft groans in the pipes, the far-off cough of a restless guest, the faint hum of fluorescent lighting trying not to die. I'd finished refilling the tea caddy, noted a loose tile by the staff elevator, and made my way to the west corridor, as I had every night since the voices began. But this time, something pulled. There's a closet at the end of that hallway, always locked, never used, the kind of place that no one questions because it's always been locked. I passed it hundreds of times and never gave it a second thought. Tonight, it stood ajar. No key, no click of a lock, just open. Inside, dust rose like mist from a forgotten past. Old paint cans, broken mop handles, coils of dead wire. The back wall looked off, its surface misaligned, as if it had been hastily put together, the seams uneven. I ran my hand along the edge. There was a draft. And then I found it. A narrow panel, flush with the wall, but looser than it should have been. I applied pressure and it gave with a sigh, like something long asleep exhaling as it woke. The panel shifted, revealing not insulation or wiring, but a passage, not wide, not tall, but real. I took the flashlight from my belt and stepped through. The space beyond was quiet in the way that heavy snow is quiet, dense with silence. The corridor was long, narrower than any hallway should have been, the walls unfinished, rough with old plaster and rivets. It had the feel of something unapproved, something hidden in the margins of blueprints. No pipes, no vents, just darkness and a floor coated in the fine grit of years. The hallway ended in a door, wooden, heavy, old. The number was there, nailed crookedly to the surface in tarnished brass. 119. I don't know how long I stood staring. My hand hovered near the knob, but didn't touch. My breath caught in my chest like it was waiting to see if the door would move on its own. Behind it, no sound, no voices, no radio. Only the promise of something just beyond knowing. The handle was colder than ice. I turned it slowly, half expecting resistance. There was none. The door opened inward with a creak that echoed too far, like it was reaching into a larger space than the corridor should have allowed. Inside, dimness, stillness. The room was small, maybe 12 by 12 feet. A single wooden chair stood in the center beneath a light bulb that swayed slightly, though there was no breeze. Against the far wall sat an old radio, the kind with knobs the size of fists, and a speaker mesh browned with age. It emitted a faint, low-frequency hum. On the wall opposite, a mirror, rectangular, framed in black, and mounted above the mirror, a clock. Its hands sat fixed at 3:33. I stepped inside. The floor groaned under my weight, not rot but memory. Like the floor remembered who used to walk here, or who still did. I moved toward the chair. Its wood was smoothed at the edges, worn by use. Someone had sat here, often, facing the radio, facing the mirror. The hum from the radio grew sharper, like it was reacting to my presence. A flicker passed across the mirror. No image, just distortion, like static on glass. Then the clock ticked. Once, no movement of the hands, just a sound. A hollow, deliberate tick that echoed inside my bones. I spoke aloud for the first time since entering. "Is someone here?" No answer. But the hum deepened. For a second, I could swear I heard breathing, not mine, close. I lifted the flashlight and scanned the corners. Nothing. When I turned back toward the mirror, my reflection was gone. The chair, the radio, the light bulb, still visible, but no sign of me. Then, slowly, the reflection shifted. A woman, late 30s, hair in a bun, pale hands folded in her lap, sitting in the chair. But the chair behind me was empty. I stepped back. The reflection stayed. She didn't move. But her eyes followed mine. Her mouth opened slowly. I turned to run. The bulb above me flared and popped. The room went dark. The hum stopped. Silence collapsed in on itself. I stumbled into the hallway, heart drumming in my throat, and slammed the door behind me. For a moment I stood there, hand on the knob, trying to catch my breath. Then, from behind the door, a soft click, like a lock turning itself from the inside. I retraced my steps through the passage and emerged back into the closet, dust on my sleeves, my mind teetering between terror and disbelief. Back at the desk, the lobby clock still read 2:28, but my watch read 3:33. I played the recorder, static. Then, at exactly 3 minutes and 33 seconds, "You weren't supposed to come back." The voice was mine, but I never said it. End of recording. The walk to the hotel that night felt longer. The streets were quiet, but not in a peaceful way, more like a city holding its breath. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see something behind me that never materialized. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was the weight of that room. Room 119 wasn't just a hidden space anymore. It had shape, texture, voice. It had started to speak back. I'd spent the entire day trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I saw, that the reflection in the mirror was some trick of shadow and stress, that the voice on the tape wasn't my own, that the door I entered had never really existed. But when I arrived for my shift, my hands trembling slightly on the keycard terminal, I noticed a faint trace of dust on my shoes, the same fine gray powder that coated the floor of the corridor behind the wall. No one else noticed. No one ever does. I didn't go to the closet that night, not yet. I wanted to watch, to wait. So I stayed behind the desk, the recorder on, the lights low, eyes locked on the hallway that held too much silence. At 1:20, the elevator dinged, but no one stepped out. The doors opened. The doors closed. The log showed no call from any floor. I walked over, flashlight in hand, pressed the button for the lobby. The elevator responded instantly. When the doors parted, it was empty, but not blank. On the floor, neatly centered, lay a cassette tape. No case, no label, just old magnetic tape in a cracked black shell with a short piece of masking tape across the top. In faded pen, Session 4, G. Back at the desk, I rummaged through the lost and found drawer. Found an ancient tape player with dying batteries. Slid the cassette in and hit play. Nothing at first, then static, then voices. A man and a woman in mid-conversation. The man's voice was calm, analytical, recorded in the tone of a therapist or doctor. The woman's voice was softer, hesitant, uncertain. The content of their words was mundane. Childhood memories, a recurring dream, fear of hallways. But it wasn't the content that froze me. It was the voice of the woman. I'd heard it before. In the mirror. In room 1:19. The man refers to her as Grace. He asks her to recall what happened in the corridor. She hesitates, then says something barely above a whisper. There was a room. It didn't belong to the building. It belonged to me. Then the tape ends. I replayed it, listened again and again. Each time the woman's voice became more distinct, more real, as if she were growing closer through the speakers. Later, while filing a report about a flickering hallway light, standard procedure, I opened the archive cabinet and saw something strange wedged between the maintenance folders. A slim black notebook. No label, no markings. Inside, pages filled with erratic handwriting. Session logs. Dated entries from 1961 through 1962. The handwriting matched none of the hotel staff. At the bottom of the third page, a scrawled name, Grace Ellman, followed by an underlined phrase, "Memory is a room you must leave slowly." My hands went cold. On the final page, a diagram. An overhead sketch of a room with dimensions that matched exactly what I had seen behind the hidden corridor, the chair, the mirror, the radio, the door. But in the diagram, something else was present. A second door. It led nowhere. That night, the mirror in the lounge cracked again. A new fracture, arcing diagonally across the frame like a vein of black lightning. I hadn't touched it. At 3:33, I walked to the west hallway. The wallpaper bulged slightly now, the seam more visible than ever, a barely contained pressure. I leaned close, not touching this time, just listening. What I heard wasn't a voice, it was my own footsteps, coming from inside the wall. I turned back, but the corridor behind me was still, the carpet undisturbed. But the sound repeated, familiar weight, pace, rhythm. Footsteps. I recognized not from memory but from habit. I pulled out the recorder and hit play on the last night's session. Scrolled forward to the moment the bulb burst in. Room 1, 19. There, buried under the blast and hiss of broken glass, was a voice. Not mine, not Grace's, a new voice, male, calm, measured. "Memory does not belong to you, Ethan. You are only borrowing it." I stopped the tape, looked up, and for just a second, in the dark reflection of the lobby window, I saw the chair again. Occupied. I turned around. There was nothing there, only the whisper of static from the recorder, still running, still listening. End of recording. There were two things I was certain of when I began my shift that night. The first, I had never met Grace Ellman. The second, I remembered her hands. Thin, pale, with a faint scar along the left wrist. I could see them clearly, resting in her lap, folded in quiet tension beneath the mirror in room 119. I had never spoken to her. Yet I could recall the way her fingers curled inward when the light above her flickered. The memory wasn't mine, but it lived in me now. I didn't clock in. I walked straight past the front desk, past the vending machines, down the west corridor. The wallpaper over the false wall was peeling now, no longer subtle in its concealment. The seam had split. A crack had formed. Inside the closet, the hidden passage waited like an open throat. I didn't hesitate. Dust clung to the air again, but this time it smelled of copper and ink. The narrow corridor had shifted, slightly longer, slightly colder. As I reached the end, I noticed the door had changed too. The brass numbers were gone. In their place, scratched faintly into the wood. Here. I opened it. Inside, the chair still stood in the center. The radio still hummed, though the station had changed. A low, looping piano melody drifted from the speaker now, haunting, repetitive, like a lullaby written by someone who had forgotten how dreams were supposed to end. And the mirror was full, but not with me. A man sat in the chair. Early 50s, thick-framed glasses, dark tie, sleeves rolled to the elbows. He was writing in a notebook, head bowed, pen scratching slowly. I couldn't hear the sound, but I could see the movement, the rhythm of a hand used to confession. The strange part was this. I recognized his face. not as someone I'd met, but as someone I had once been. A flicker, a trace of self layered beneath time. The man looked up, right at me. Then he smiled. I blinked, and the mirror was empty again. I approached the radio. Its casing was cracked at the base now, and wires had begun to uncoil, snaking across the floor like veins from a dead heart. I reached for the dial, unsure what I hoped to find. As I turned it, the melody warped, sped up, reversed, then stopped. Silence. Then a voice, faint, clipped, mechanical. Session 13, patient E. Brooks. My breath caught, the voice continued. Symptoms include loss of linear memory, dream recurrence, identity drift. Patient describes repeated auditory hallucinations involving the number 119. It was me, but not as I am now, my voice, stripped of emotion, reading from a form. Clinical. Cold. Treatment suspended due to environmental interference. I stepped back. The mirror rippled. Not a figure this time, but a place. The hotel lobby, dim, quiet, but not as it is, as it was. The carpet brighter, the front desk a different shape. A woman standing behind it in a gray uniform, laughing with someone just out of frame. And then the camera moved. It was my perspective. I was walking toward the desk. I was wearing a coat I haven't owned in years. My voice, checking in. Name's Brooks. One night. The mirror darkened. I turned to leave. But the door wouldn't open. I pulled the handle twice, 3 times. Nothing. It didn't resist. It just didn't respond. Like a door that had decided it was no longer a door. Behind me, the radio crackled again. A different voice this time. You can't leave while you remember. I spun around. The chair was empty, but the air in the room had shifted, compressed. The mirror now showed only static. Beneath the floorboards, something creaked. Movement, slow and circular, like a hand winding a mechanism. I dropped to my knees beside the chair. The floorboards were scratched. Not from shoes, from nails, fingernails. Countless tiny grooves etched in spirals beneath where the chair had sat, and at the center of the spiral, burned into the wood, the same initials as the notebook. G. E. I whispered her name. Grace. The radio answered. You have to forget. The light above me flickered once, then surged white-hot. The bulb burst in a halo of glass and heat. Darkness swallowed the room. For a moment, only breath, mine, fast and shallow. Then, just at the edge of hearing, a chorus of voices, not speaking, repeating, overlapping. We are still here, we are still here, we are still here. The door opened by itself. I left without looking back. When I emerged into the lobby, I saw something on the front desk. A tape recorder, not mine. The label, Marrow. Staff debriefing May 3rd, 1982. I pressed play. The voice, male, tired. If you're hearing this, then you've already started remembering. That's how it always begins. You think you're investigating, but really, you're just making your way back. I stopped the tape. The clock on the wall read 2:41, but my watch said 3:33. End of recording. The Marrow house had begun to lose its shape. I don't mean structurally, though the cracks in the ceilings had grown longer, and the hallway sconces now flickered even when the power was stable. I mean in a deeper way. The building no longer obeyed the rules of distance or time. I could feel it every time I walked from one end to the other. How the steps didn't match the length. How a hallway repeated itself in subtle ways. A painting that should have hung by room 112 now appeared by the vending machines. A trash can I emptied at midnight was full again at 2. But what disturbed me most were the people. Not the guests I knew by name or room number. Those came and went with the usual forgettable politeness. It was the others. The ones who didn't check in. The ones who didn't pass the front desk or leave footprints on the carpet. They appeared in the corners of vision, sitting in the lounge with their backs turned, stepping out of elevators that no one had summoned, flickering through reflections like bad frames in a film reel. Tonight I saw one of them up close. It was just after 2 when I stepped into the hallway near the maintenance closet. I wasn't heading for the hidden passage, not this time. I'd promised myself I wouldn't go back in. I just needed to check the thermostat. The temperature in that wing had dropped dramatically, and a guest from 116 had complained of frost forming on their window from the inside. As I turned the corner, a man stepped out from the shadows. Mid-40s, tall, dressed in a bellhop uniform from another century. The red coat was immaculate, the brass buttons dull with age. Didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, staring down the corridor with a dead stillness that had nothing to do with patience. I opened my mouth to ask if he needed help. He looked at me, and in that moment I remembered his face. From a photograph. An old staff portrait I'd found during my first week, tucked behind the breaker box. Marrow House personnel, winter 1959. His name had been Marvin. He vanished before I could speak again. Not walked away, not turned, just gone. As though he had blinked out of sync with the rest of reality and the space he occupied folded in on itself. I stood alone in the corridor, heart in my throat, trying not to imagine what would have happened if I'd tried to touch him. I returned to the front desk. The recorder was still running. I'd started leaving it on continuously. Not because I expected to hear anything live, but because there were moments, tiny distortions in the audio, that only showed up in playback. Like time in this place didn't just move forward, it unraveled. At 3:29, the lights flickered twice and then surged, plunging the lobby into an unnatural dimness. Not darkness, worse than darkness. A gray, sallow light that made everything look like it was underwater. And from down the hall, the voice returned. But this time, it didn't come from behind the wall. It came from the air itself. You can't carry all of it, Ethan. It was a whisper stretched across distance and time, distorted like it had been played through dozens of old tapes before reaching me. I didn't ask who was speaking. I knew. Grace. I stepped away from the desk, following the sound like it was tethered to me. Through the corridor, past the locked doors toward the lounge. The mirror had changed. The crack was now a network, like a spider's web, reaching across the entire surface. But it wasn't broken. It had become deeper, not reflective, receptive. It showed a version of the lobby, but empty, not just of people, of color, of detail. Washed out grayscale echo, and in that echo I saw myself, standing behind the front desk, alone, motionless, but different. The figure in the mirror looked up. Its eyes were hollow, not injured, not blackened, just missing, as if memory had been scooped out from within and replaced with silence. The figure raised its hand and pointed behind me. I turned and saw her. Grace stood at the end of the hallway, barely visible in the gloom. Same gray coat, same stillness. Her hands were shaking, slightly rhythmically, as if struggling to hold something in place. I approached slowly. She didn't move. When I was within 10 feet, she spoke. "Do you remember the first door you opened?" I hesitated, shook my head. "You should forget it," she said. "All of it, or you'll never leave." She held something out in her hand, a cassette tape. The label had been torn off. I reached for it. The moment I touched it, the world shifted. The hallway around us bent. not metaphorically, the walls actually bent, curving inward like a fisheye lens. The light dimmed into violet. Somewhere behind me, a door slammed open, and wind rushed through the corridor as if we were inside a collapsing lung. Grace looked at me with eyes full of exhaustion. Not fear, not anger. "Memory is a room," she whispered, "and you've lived in too many." Then she vanished. The tape was still in my hand. I ran, back to the front desk, slammed the recorder shut and inserted the new cassette. Pressed play. For a moment, just static. Then, my own voice. But the timestamp was wrong. It was dated for tomorrow. "You didn't listen, Ethan. You never do. Now, the room's awake, and it's remembering you." I ejected the tape, trembling. Opened it. Inside, instead of the usual brown magnetic reel, there was a tiny strip of photo paper, tightly wound. I pulled it free. It showed a single image. Me. Sitting in the chair in room 119, eyes missing, mouth slightly open, hands folded neatly in my lap. End of recording. There's a difference between being watched and being remembered. Watched is passive. It's the present tense. But to be remembered is more intimate, something that requires history, intent, a relationship. You can hide from being watched. But when something remembers you, it means you've already been inside it. And it's inside you. I didn't sleep after the tape. I sat on my bed with the photo strip in my hand until the sky turned gray, the light too weak to chase away the image it held. My own face, eyes empty, posture perfect, the curve of my mouth like a cracked porcelain doll. I arrived at the hotel just before midnight. There was no check-in sheet, no scheduled staff change, no lights on in the lobby, no one had opened the place. And yet, the doors were unlocked. Inside, the air was wrong. It had that dense, sterile cold you find in hospital morgues or long-sealed underground rooms, as if no breath had passed through it for years. I turned on the front lights, but only half responded. A portion of the lobby flickered, the rest swallowed in low amber dimness that made corners feel bottomless. I turned on the recorder and set it down. Entry log, Friday night, unknown time. I think it's still me. I think I still remember who I am. But I don't know if I ever left. The words sounded fragile as I said them, like they were printed on tissue paper and drifting toward flame. I moved through the west hallway slowly, expecting it to shift beneath my feet. It did. Each step felt slightly off, as if the floor was recalibrating in real time. Longer than before, wider or maybe curved. The wallpaper now pulsed in and out like lungs inflating. The seam where room 119 should be throbbed visibly. The plaster damp with condensation or something worse. But I didn't go through the closet. I didn't need to anymore. The wall was already gone. A corridor stretched beyond it now, bare and narrow, lined with fractured picture frames. Each one filled with a still image, each one familiar. Not from photographs, but from memory. My memory. One showed the lunchroom of my elementary school. Another, my mother's old sewing room. One was my first apartment, with the stained couch and that cracked window that whistled at night. The corridor was lined with fragments of my life. I moved faster, something inside me beginning to panic. Not from fear, but from the realization that these memories were no longer mine. They had been archived, rearranged, displayed, consumed. The end of the hallway opened into room 119, but it had changed. There were now 2 chairs. The radio sat silent, a coil of black wire dangling like a severed umbilical cord. The mirror had grown wider, taller, stretching from floor to ceiling. But it no longer showed reflections. It showed lives. I stepped closer, watching the surface shift. A boy on a bike, face turned toward me in confusion. A hospital bed, an old man clutching my hand, a woman crying in a stairwell I'd never seen before, but felt I'd walked past 100 times. Then the images stopped, and the mirror showed only me. Not how I looked, but how the room saw me. A figure in a uniform with no name tag, gray skin, hollow eyes, mouth sewn shut by strands of black thread. I reached up to touch my own lips. They were whole. In the mirror, they began to move. "You stayed too long." I backed away. The radio snapped on. No dial, no power, just a burst of shrill white noise, followed by a single, sharp beep. Then a voice. Calm, measured, familiar. "Patient number 0. Brooks Ethan. Voluntary containment acknowledged. Identity confirmation pending. Memory fusion complete." I stumbled, hit the chair with the back of my legs, sat down. The door behind me shut by itself. I tried to stand. I couldn't. The chair held me, not with force but with finality, like I had reached the end of a loop, and the loop was satisfied. My limbs were mine, but they didn't respond. I lifted my hand and watched it hover halfway, before lowering again. The lights dimmed, the mirror turned black, and then it began to replay. Me, sitting, talking into a recorder, log entries from days, weeks, maybe months ago, all playing in sequence, then layered, as if 1,000 versions of me were speaking at once. Then silence. A new voice spoke, feminine, soft, grace. "Now do you see? The room was never locked. You are the key." The floor vibrated gently, and a soft light began to pulse from beneath the floorboards. A heartbeat, steady and echoing through my bones. The chair began to shift position, slowly rotating until I faced the mirror directly. The surface lit up again. It no longer showed me. It showed the front desk, the lobby, and a man standing behind the counter, not me. A new face, unfamiliar, young, tired, holding a tape recorder in one hand, and through the speakers of my own device in real time, I heard his voice. "First shift at the Marrow House. Pretty quiet so far. Thought I'd keep a little log in case. The silence starts to crawl too deep." The tape stopped, and then I understood. I was the recording now, the memory, not Ethan Brooks the man, but Ethan Brooks, the story the room tells itself, over and over and over, until someone else sits in the chair, until someone else listens, until someone else remembers me. And by then, I won't even remember myself. Only the mirror will, only the hum, only the clock, forever frozen at 3:33. End of recording. The Marrow House doesn't open anymore. It waits. The building still stands, tall and gray at the edge of the city, its windows dull, its bricks flaking with the slow rot of forgotten things. The front doors remain unlocked, but no one enters by choice. Not anymore. The guests who do come often don't remember why. They arrive without luggage, without a destination, their names absent from the ledger and their memories fogged like bathroom mirrors. Tonight, I watched one of them arrive. He wore a dark green jacket and held a cracked phone in his hand, the screen frozen on a map that no longer refreshed. He wandered through the doors like someone searching for the last address in a dream. When I looked up from the desk, he looked at me, and in that moment I saw the flicker of realization in his eyes, the kind that only lasts an instant, a sense of déjà vu so overwhelming it paralyzes you. Then it was gone. He asked if we had rooms. I told him yes. Of course, we always have rooms. He hesitated. "I think I've been here before." I handed him the key to room 120, careful not to touch his fingers. As he turned to leave, he glanced over his shoulder. "There used to be a room 119, didn't there?" I smiled. He didn't. The elevator doors closed behind him. The hum began again. Later, after the lobby returned to its static stillness, I went into the back office. The lights flickered once before stabilizing. I opened the bottom drawer of the old metal cabinet and pulled out the black recorder. It was heavier than it used to be. Time does that. Fills things with the weight of memory. There was already a tape inside. I pressed play. Static for several minutes, then footsteps, breathing. My voice. Day 12, or maybe day 1. I don't know anymore. The calendar flipped itself while I wasn't looking, and now it's just a series of blank squares. I think the building is starting over. I think I am, too. More static, then a voice I didn't recognize. Male, weary, younger. Log 1, first night shift at Marrow. Weird place. Found a door that doesn't match the blueprint. Might just be old renovations. A pause, and then... There's a mirror in the lounge that doesn't show reflections, just moments. I saw my father. He's been dead 5 years. He breathed deeply as if trying to ground himself. Anyway, it's probably just fatigue or atmosphere. I'll keep recording, just in case. Click. The next recording started automatically. Another voice, another visitor. Then another. Then another. Each one slowly unraveling, piece by piece. Descriptions of voices. Hallways that shift when no one's looking. Guests who vanish between floors. Time slippage, memories that don't belong to them. All slowly circling the same gravitational pull. Room 119. I turned off the recorder. The hallway beyond the west wing has grown longer now. What used to be 10 paces is now 20. The wallpaper is peeling more aggressively, revealing fragments of handwritten notes beneath. Scribbled in ink and coal and blood. Names mostly. Some I recognize. Some I fear I will. There is no more closet, only the passage. I walked it tonight with no flashlight. The door was open. Room 119 had transformed again. The chairs were gone. The mirror had shattered entirely, its shards embedded in the floor like black teeth. The radio had split open, its inner wires hanging like vines, twitching slightly, as if alive. At the center of the room now sat a reel-to-reel tape machine. Massive. Industrial. Its reels spun slowly, even without power, feeding tape through invisible fingers. A dozen spools of black ribbon spilled onto the floor, stretching out in every direction like veins across the tiles. I bent to examine one of the tapes. On the leader tape was a single handwritten word, Ethan. I found my name again and again on the spools, written in different scripts, different languages. Sometimes it was shortened. Sometimes it was just E. One reel simply read, Caretaker. They weren't recordings of me, they were me. Memories, thoughts, dreams, fractured identities. Fragments of self wound into magnetic breath. The machine didn't play them. It was them. I understood that now. Room 1. 19 wasn't a room, it was an archive, a container, and it had learned how to feed itself. It fed on us, on memory, on self. As I reached for one of the reels, it tightened under my fingers, recoiling, resisting. The spools spun faster, agitated. The room began to pulse. A low frequency hummed up through the floorboards, deep and bone-shaking. The light overhead flickered, then steadied into a pale orange glow. The radio crackled. I didn't touch it. It turned on by itself. This time, it played only a voice. My voice. Speaking calmly, slowly, as if explaining something long rehearsed. You came here looking for answers. You found a story. But stories don't leave. They wait. They become the room. They become the air. A pause. You're not hearing this in real time. You're hearing this because you need to. And then, softer, almost kind. This is where you end. This is where we begin. I reached for the tape recorder in my pocket. Pressed record. The hum stopped, the light went out. The room went silent. And I spoke into the dark. This is Ethan Brooks, last log. I'm part of the memory now. I don't know if I'm the first. I know I won't be the last. If you find this, you're already inside. Don't look for the door. It's not real. The room remembers. And now, a faint breath behind. Me, cold. So do you. The tape clicked. End of recording. Begin the mirror. This is going to sound weird, but maybe someone else out there has experienced something similar. I've been waking up at exactly 4:33 in the morning. Every night. No alarm, no sound, just a snap, awake, always at that same minute. I checked my phone the first couple times, thought maybe it was a coincidence, but I've been logging it now for 8 nights in a row. 4:33, not 4:32, not 4:34, always the same. And the thing is, I'm not waking up because of a bad dream. There's no panic, no noise. I just sit up, like something called me without speaking. I live alone, second floor of an old duplex near Fort Collins. Quiet neighborhood. I usually sleep like a rock, but now I wake up so alert it feels surgical, like being pulled out of anesthesia by someone you can't see. I don't hear anything. Not exactly, but there's this feeling, like pressure on the air. Imagine standing near a generator humming in the walls, except there's no hum, just the sense of one. It's not even in my ears, it's under the skin, behind the eyes. Something tightens, like the world is holding its breath. After the third night, I stopped trying to fall back asleep. I just sat on the edge of the bed and listened. The longer I stayed still, the more I felt like something was listening back. I know that sounds crazy, but I swear, the silence at 4:33 isn't natural. It has texture, like something moving beneath it. Too far away to hear, but close enough to know you're being scanned. I told my coworker about it, just casually. She laughed it off until I mentioned the time. Then she got really quiet. Said she's been waking up at that time too. Only difference is, she hears this soft whine, like a dog whistle just below perception. Her boyfriend can't hear it. Thought she was imagining it. But now she avoids sleeping altogether. I've started asking people, casually, like it's a joke. Ever wake up at the same time every night? I keep getting the same answer. Around 4:30. Always 4:30-something. The same tone when they say it. That weird pause before they answer, like they're realizing it in real time. Tonight, I decided to record the room. Left my phone on voice memo. Hit record at 4:28, then just lay still and waited. Eyes closed. No movement. At 4:33 exactly, I opened them. No dreams, no sound. But when I listened back, there was a sound. Only for about 4 seconds. Right at the mark. Not a beep, not a bang. Just a low-frequency blur, like the inside of a power station underwater. I sent the file to a friend who works with audio. He boosted the levels and said there was nothing measurable on the waveform. Noise floor artifact, he called it. But when he listened again, he paused. "You heard this?" he asked. Then went silent for a long time. Later, he messaged me just 2 words. "Don't listen." Which brings me to now. I've been reading back through old threads. Here, missing time, synchronicity, dream invasions. Nothing fits perfectly, but I'm starting to get the feeling this isn't just me. There's too much convergence. Too many unrelated people waking at the exact same time for no reason. And some of them, those who answered me privately, said things I haven't even posted yet. One guy described the same pressure in the air, Another said he started talking in his sleep only at 4:33. His partner recorded it. Just one phrase, over and over. "It's almost time, almost time." That's the same phrase I heard in a dream 2 nights ago. I hadn't written it down. I don't think this is a normal sleep disorder. I don't think this is sleep at all. If you've experienced this, if you're waking at 4:33 or hearing anything strange, please reply. Even anonymously, I just want to know I'm not alone. Or maybe I do want to be alone. Because if we're all hearing the same thing, that means something's sending it. And something else is making sure we wake up to hear it. Document, Internal Field Report, RSO2, Researcher, Dr. Jordan Vale, Ph.D. affiliation, North Colorado Institute of Auditory Phenomena, NCIA. Status, Preliminary Field Analysis, Subjective Acoustic Events. Date, March 12th. The pattern first emerged in late February when a colleague forwarded a Reddit thread titled, "Anyone else waking up at 4:33 a.m.?" Normally, I wouldn't give weight to anecdotal claims sourced from unverified online forums, but this case had peculiar statistical density. Over 200 self-reports in under 72 hours, most with nearly identical descriptions of the event, spontaneous waking at precisely 4:33 ante-meridiem, with no identifiable cause, accompanied by subjective sensations of pressure, dread, and a silent hum. As a psychoacoustic researcher specializing in infrasonic phenomena and hypersonic modulation perception, I've spent the last 10 years investigating edge case audio perception anomalies. Phantom, vibrations, infrasound hallucinations, negative frequency exposure, etc. And yet, none of those known pathologies explained this. There is no known natural event, man-made signal, or mechanical cycle that peaks across multiple geographies at the exact same minute with zero instrumentation confirmation. I began collecting samples. 12 participants across 6 states were sent portable EEG-compatible sleep monitors, low-frequency microphones, and binaural loggers, calibrated to detect signal ranges between 0.1 Hz to 35 kHz, including infraliminal resonance. Participants were instructed to sleep naturally for 1 week and record ambient sound with timestamps, even if they did not wake during the event. Findings. In all 12 recordings, microphones registered no acoustic anomaly at 4:33 WAO. EEGs, however, showed abrupt alpha wave disruption at precisely 4:32.57. In 5 cases, subjects remained asleep behaviorally, but displayed neural signatures equivalent to sudden auditory, stimuli, or trauma recall. In 7 cases, subjects woke, sitting upright or gasping, without conscious awareness of a sound. In post-sleep interviews, all subjects used near-identical language, like being pulled upward, like something just snapped me awake, or the silence was louder than the noise. None of the recorded frequencies, even when filtered, exceeded background noise. But visually, the waveform displayed a minute ripple, an artifact inconsistent with mic noise or environmental interference. To validate this, I attempted to isolate the moment across recordings. The ripple appears exactly at the same timestamp, 4:33 Hurido Hui13, across all 12. That level of temporal convergence is impossible without synchronization. These are different time zones, different locations, different atmospheric conditions. And yet, something arrives at that moment. Not sound, not in the way we understand it. I began to suspect that what's occurring is not an audio transmission in the traditional sense, but a cognitive echo, a psychotemporal event localized within the brain's response system, possibly induced by an environmental trigger that no known sensor can register. A frequency so low or complex that the ear cannot detect it, yet the neurology does. To test the theory, I ran my own trial. Personal journal excerpt, March 14th, or 3:46 a.m. tonight. I set up controlled conditions, soundproof chamber, isolated from EM and low-freq emissions, EEG cap, subharmonic spectral tracker, real-time recorder. My aim, sleep with full biometric and acoustic monitoring until 5 a.m., see what happens when it reaches that hour. I did not ingest any sleep aids or stimulants. Lights off at 23:41. Sometime before 4:30, I began dreaming. Not vividly, just flashes. Gray corridors, fluorescent light tubes, indistinct mechanical sounds like distant turbines. At one point, I heard someone say, "You're not late, you're just early." Then I woke up. No noise. I sat up, fully alert. I looked. At the clock, 4:33 a.m. My body was calm. Heart rate elevated, but not excessively. No sweating, no panic. But there was a sensation, like I had stepped into a pressurized zone. The air in the room felt wrong. Heavy. My ears didn't ring, but it felt as if they should have, like they'd just adjusted from altitude. I checked the logs immediately. Here is where it gets disturbing. My EEG shows a spike in parietal and prefrontal cortex activation beginning at 4:32:57, exactly like the test subjects. But my video feed is blank from 4:33:01 to 4:37:12. Not static, not corrupted, just nothing. The recording resumes with me still seated on the edge of the bed, eyes open. Staring forward, mouth slightly open, no movement, except I remember getting up, walking to the equipment. I remember checking the waveform in real time. I remember unplugging the monitor and writing a note. None of it is on camera. It's like the memory was planted but not lived. I reviewed the audio. At 4:33:03, the waveform registers a single glitch, a blip, lasting less than a second. When amplified, it sounds like nothing, just empty spectrum, a void in the middle of the signal. And yet, when I listened to it alone, in silence, at full volume, I felt it. A pressure. A shift behind the eyes, like something stepped closer inside my head. It was not sound, it was the shape of silence being used. I don't know what it is yet, but I've begun compiling what I'm now calling the 433 frequency. It's not being broadcast, it's being remembered. And I suspect we're not detecting it because it's not being sent to our ears. It's being addressed to us. Individually, one by one, more to follow. Archived messages, private forum, the circle, 0433, access, encrypted, visibility, invite only, moderator, null signal, date range, March 16, 22, user, signal ghost. I didn't want to post this publicly, so thank you for letting me in. I found the Reddit thread last week about waking up at 4:33. That's how it started for me, too. But something else happened last night. I didn't just wake up. I was standing, fully dressed. I don't remember getting out of bed. I live alone. My door was unlocked. I don't sleepwalk. I've never had a history of it. And yet, I was in the middle of the living room, holding my phone, camera on. It had been recording for 4 minutes. There's no sound on the video, but I'm mouthing something. Over and over. I tried syncing my lips to the movement. It looks like I'm saying, "We're too early, but it's almost ready." User, 2 sides mirror. My brother and I both started hearing it this week. He's 19. He calls it the whisper under the floor. He doesn't mean it literally. Just the feeling that the house wants to say something, but it can't. He's been drawing symbols. I'll post one below. Says it comes to him when he closes his eyes at night. Attached image, crude circular symbol drawn in graphite. 12 short, inward-facing. Lines radiate from perimeter to center. A vertical slash through the middle. When I asked what it means, he just said, "It's the clock that doesn't tick." User, thread 0. I've compiled over 70 reports now from different users. Patterns. Waking time, 4.33 plus 0.1 seconds. Sensation, pressure in skull or chest. Absence of environmental trigger. Follow-up behavior, silence, catatonia, or low murmuring speech. Notable deviation. 3 users claim to have heard voices not in English, described as pure thought rather than spoken language. 2 users independently used identical phrasing to describe what they felt during the sound. It's not outside, it's behind the moment. Private message from a sleepless loop to Diat thread 0, March 18th, 03:57 a.m. I've kept quiet until now, but I think it's time. My name is Daniel. I'm not just waking up, I'm changing. I don't mean that metaphorically. I used to be a night owl. Messy sleep, couldn't wake up before noon. Now, I wake up at 4:33 on my own no matter what time I fall asleep. Even if I stay up past 4, I black out around 4:31 and wake 2 minutes later. It's not just a time, it's a place. At 4:33, something happens. Not externally, spatially. The layout of my apartment feels different. Doors seem closer. The ceiling feels lower. My footsteps echo like I'm walking in a larger version of the room, but it's the same size. Yesterday morning, I felt it most intensely. The moment I opened my eyes, I could hear someone walking upstairs. Slow, deliberate pacing. I live on the top floor, no one above me. Then I realized I was hearing it from inside my own ceiling. I don't remember going back to sleep, but I must have. When I woke again around 7, I found a mark on my shoulder. I'm sending you a photo. Image metadata D5A4 check subject. Left shoulder, adult male. Mark. Circular burn no more than 2 inches in diameter. Red edges. Distinct pattern resembling clockwise spiral. Intersected by a cross. User, null signal. Mod note. Daniel has not logged in since 03:59 a.m. March 18th. His final message was flagged and preserved. I can feel the signal when I close my eyes now. It isn't noise, it's waiting. I'm going to follow it. Don't try to stop it, it's clearer out there. System, ping. A sleepless loop. User unreachable. External relay failed. Log entry, researcher. Jordan Vale, March 21st, 2317. I joined the forum under alias Zero Compression to monitor conversations. This is no longer theoretical. There's a design behind this event, an echo structured like a ritual. Timing is consistent. Patterns are spreading. And now, symbols. I redrew Daniel's mark on a whiteboard. Ran image comparison through 5 symbolic linguistics databases. Closest match, a Mayan glyph associated with sleepwalking rituals, translated roughly as memory opens gates. Coincidence? I don't think so. It's no longer about what people are hearing, it's about what's being prepared through them. They aren't just receivers, they're rehearsal spaces. The sound doesn't need to be understood, it just needs obedience. I believe I'm next. Document, compiled observations from Sleep Clinic Archives. Research facilitator, Dr. Miranda Kess, Pediatric Neuropsychiatry Division, Milwaukee Sleep Institute Subject Pool. 9 children, ages 6 to 11. Common trigger, spontaneous awakening at 4:33 a.m., confirmed by biometric sleep trackers. Date range, March 12, 24. Patient Mywazo 3. It came from the side where the window isn't. It knew I was pretending to be asleep, but I had to be still. That's the rule. If you move, it thinks you're ready. Patient Mywazo 7. I didn't dream like a cartoon dream. I dreamed like it was real. I was in my own house, but all the pictures on the walls were backwards. And there was writing on the ceiling that said, "Go to the center," but it was upside down. Patient Mywazo 1. I heard my dad calling me from the hall, but he was sleeping in his room. I checked, but the voice said, "Your father is remembering the sound." Out of the 9 children observed over the span of 12 nights, All woke at 4:33 a.m. at least once, despite no common location, familial ties, or exposure to each other. All described sensations of pressure in the chest, paralyzing quiet, and being noticed. 3 of them drew nearly identical diagrams upon waking: a large circle, a small central dot, 12 short lines radiating inward from the perimeter. Sometimes a diagonal slash through the center. One child added words inside the outer circle, "They don't use time." Several parents independently reported hearing their children speaking low phrases in their sleep at the time of the awakenings, which they described as automatic, or as if rehearsed. Key phrases transcribed from voice-activated baby monitors. "Stay still until the silence is over." "Don't talk, don't breathe, just hear." "The sky is closing again." The frequency remembers. These recordings were cross-analyzed and found to contain no background sound or distortion, but a consistent low-end waveform emerged in spectrographic analysis. The tone sits at 0.9 Hz, below human hearing range, yet consistent in shape with patterns used in subconscious entrainment in behavioral therapy. Note from Field Agent Thorne, Colorado Sleep Research Co-op, March 20th. Subject, voluntary admission. Megan L., age 32, single mother of 1. Megan reported she began waking each morning at 4:33 a.m., shortly after her 6-year-old son began exhibiting strange sleep behaviors. She began keeping a notebook near her bed to jot down what she heard him say during the episodes. On the 5th night, she claims the boy stood in the center of the bedroom, eyes open, and whispered, "The code is almost ready. We need more who can dream the same." The next morning, she discovered new writing in the notebook. Not hers. A clean script in graphite that read, "There is one dream. We are just learning how to share it." The handwriting does not match hers or her son's. No one else has access to the home. Telegram, chat transcript. March 21st. Listen born, seed. Private channel participants. Alias only. Black sigil, sun angle, Jupiter, cradle eye. Black sigil. My niece spoke in full sentences last night. "She's 4, doesn't talk in dreams usually," she said. "I heard it before I was born." Then she asked if I knew where the lines meet. Jupiter. I showed my son the old Foxcall radar diagram someone posted. He pointed to the central node and said, "That's where the sound sleeps." Sun angle. We're past coincidence now. These kids aren't being influenced. They're reacting to something environmental, neural, possibly artificial. Cradle eye. It's not artificial. It's old. We're just now catching up. Excerpt. Personal letter, unsigned, found in mailbox of Dr. Jordan Vale, March 22nd. They're not speaking in their own words. They're accessing something deeper, a networked architecture of dream data. You know this, don't you? The diagrams aren't art, they're coordinates. This isn't some new phenomenon. You've seen the hints in ancient carvings, trance music patterns, the Fibonacci spirals in primitive cave dwellings. You know the code is older than civilization. What you may not realize is this: we're not decoding the frequency, we're helping it assemble itself. And soon, it will have enough of us to speak back. Jordan Vale, Audio Journal, Shern 12, March 24th, 0106. I received a package with no return address. Inside was a flash drive. One file, recording WAV, duration 1 second. No obvious content at normal levels. But when slowed and amplified, I heard what I can only describe as a disassembled voice. Not garbled, not reversed, disassembled. The syllables were present but floating, untethered to sequence. When rearranged, manually by instinct, I heard, "Join the code." I'm not sure how I knew the order, or why I knew, what it meant, but I didn't delete the file. I've listened to it 11 times now. Each time it feels more familiar, like I'm remembering something I haven't dreamed yet. Project Log, 433, Anomaly. Field Study, Session 01. Researcher Dr. Jordan Vale, Lead Psychoacoustician Facility, NCIA Sleep Isolation Unit, Chamber, B07. Date, March 26th. Objective, voluntary induction of 433 event under tightly monitored clinical conditions. Environmental controls, electromagnetic dampening. Active, acoustic isolation, 68 dB floor minimum. Temperature, maintained at 20 to. Air pressure, regulated. Infrared motion, capture, recording at 120 FPS, dual EEG and heart rate monitor, continuous telemetry, binaural mics, calibrated from 0 waves 1 Hz to 35 kHz, optical recording, full night vision video, internal and external view. I entered chamber B07 at 23:04, no phone, no stimulants or sedatives. I had not spoken to another person for over 5 hours prior. No exposure to screens. Isolation was key. The idea was not to simulate sleep, but to surrender to the same conditions the subjects experienced naturally. I lay on the cot, observing a small LED clock with no sound cue. The room's ambient silence was total, so absolute that I could hear my pulse in my teeth. Sleep came fast. I remember very little of the initial dream state. Just fragments. The hallway outside my childhood bedroom, but the wallpaper was reversed. The feeling of descending instead of walking. A flicker of numbers that didn't line up like a clock. 431, 432, 432, 432. Then I woke. No sound had occurred. My eyes opened on their own. No twitch, no hesitation. Just open, fully alert. I reached for the tablet display beside the bed. The time read 04:33. I did not feel groggy. I felt aware in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Like my body had been waiting for something, and now it had arrived. There was a tension in the air, not pressure this time, direction. Like the air knew where it was going, and I had just entered its path. That was when the temperature shifted, not dropped, shifted. The same numeric value, same sensor readout. But my body told a different story. The sweat on my arms began to chill. The skin on my neck reacted as if to a presence, not coldness, but focus. As if I were being studied from inside the silence. I sat up. I looked toward the camera in the ceiling corner. The green indicator light was still blinking. I spoke aloud. Session log. I'm awake at 4:33 exactly, alert, no acoustic trigger detected. I waited, then I saw it. Not in the chamber, in the monitor. The feed from the thermal camera, split screen, showed 2 outlines. One was me, the other stood just behind me, motionless. No heat, no shape, just a hollow void in the space beside my left shoulder, like a human-shaped dent in the infrared spectrum. Absence, given form. I turned to look. There was nothing there. When I turned back, the monitor was black. The feed had ended. The word paused flashed for exactly 4 seconds. I hadn't touched anything. Later, during the review, I found that the internal video footage was missing from 04:33:1 to 4:38:19. The logs reported no data recorded. The telemetry showed I had not moved during those 5 minutes, and yet I had 3 new pages of handwritten notes in my field journal. I don't remember writing them. Here is what I wrote. Handwritten, block print, transcribed. The instruction does not arrive. You must become the place that hears it. Stillness is reception. Consciousness is noise. The ones who stay still long enough will begin to speak for the frequency, my handwriting, my ink. But I don't remember thinking those words, let alone writing them. I spent the next hour combing every line of every log. The microphones captured no anomalous frequency, Yet I still feel it in my bones, a subtle humming that isn't physical, but mnemonic. It's like my memory has started buffering something I haven't experienced yet. Something is trying to configure me, like I'm being calibrated to receive a kind of signal that doesn't use sound waves, a behavioral resonance. What began as a question of whether the phenomenon is real has now reversed itself. The question is, what part of me made contact? Was it my hearing, my cognition, or something beneath even that? I have scheduled a second session, but before I do, I'll be contacting several subjects from the private network who claimed similar amnesiac insertions. Because this is not about sleep anymore, it's about programming. And some of us are already running code we don't remember writing. Document classification, previously redacted project, Foxcall, declassified segment, Echo Site Operations, Wyoming Sector, 1961-1972, recovered via FOIA request, archive reference, FC199CC. In early April, using a composite map of user-reported wake events, Jordan Vale pinpointed a strange spatial convergence. Though the awakenings were globally dispersed, the epicenters of earliest synchronized reports, those dated prior to mass media awareness, clustered in a wide arc encircling northeast Wyoming. Specifically, coordinates 44.3272 again, 104 dias. These led to a decommissioned Cold War communications facility, abandoned since the early 70s. According to official government records, the site was part of a short-lived experimental program codenamed Foxcall, listed under Defense Advanced Psychotronic Evaluation and Unclassified Behavior Influence Structures. Valey's private notes include a typed, partially blacked-out field report. Operational objective. Foxcall Site Alpha. To investigate the behavioral impact of low-cycle synthetic acoustic pulses introduced during REM stage neural activity. Initial trials, subjects AA1-A12, revealed elevated parietal activity, synchronized theta suppression, and partial verbal automatism within controlled sleep parameters. Anomaly recorded on night 14, synchronized, arousal across all sleeping subjects at E0433 local time with no sound transmitted. Subsequent nights yielded consistent results even after all transmitters were deactivated. Event was labeled passive recurrence. Theoretical classification. Cognitive echo phenomenon. Autonomous repetition without external stimulus. Project terminated under order FC Eclipse following unexplained psychogenic fugue episodes among research staff. Full decommissioning executed. Site buried under reinforced concrete shell. Jordan traveled alone to the listed coordinates. He described the approach as uncanny in a way the eyes couldn't register. No signage, just a winding service road, half reclaimed by the forest, ending at a wide concrete slab overgrown with moss. No fencing, no warning markers, just a plain metal hatch fused shut with rust and what looked like melted steel. But nearby, just off the tree line, a peculiar outcropping of stone caught his attention. Unnatural in shape, like poured concrete shaped into a 12-pointed radial wheel. He measured it, 17 feet in diameter, partially sunken. At the center, a shallow cavity filled with stagnant water. The cavity formed a perfect circle. When Vale dropped a pebble into the center, it did not splash. It was as if the surface absorbed the movement before it could reach the air. On the outer edge of the radial form, barely visible beneath layers of lichen, was an engraving. We only needed to hear it once. Back at his motel, Jordan scoured old academic texts and found an obscure journal article from 1978 referencing the Foxcall problem, an internal term among former defense researchers. The article described it as the echo that precedes itself, a frequency loop unlinked from time. Another footnote led him to a book long out of print, Resonant Sleep, Tactical Use of Theta State Transmission. There, in Chapter 8, he found the first public mention of 0433 events, long before the Internet, forums, or collective documentation. Certain time thresholds during REM exhibit susceptibility to behavior coding impulses, even in the absence of external input. In one trial, subjects began exhibiting repetitive phrases and symbolic drawing after just 6 nights. The most common verbal fragment was, "When silence remembers you, you answer." Field note, Vale Journal, April 7, 0211 m. I know what I felt at that place. The slab wasn't just concrete, it was resonant. The moment I stepped on it, the pressure behind my eyes returned. Same as during my chamber test, but now it had direction. It was like facing into a wind that wasn't there. I crouched beside the engraving, brushing away dirt with my sleeve. My fingers trembled when they traced the letters. It wasn't just language, it was instruction. Later, lying awake in the motel, I couldn't shake the thought, if this site was meant to contain something, it failed, and if it was meant to activate something, it, too, succeeded decades ago. I listened to the recording again, the same anomalous audio clip from my last experiment. But this time, I heard a detail I'd missed before. A sequence of 3 short pulses, silent to the ear but present in the waveform, spaced exactly 4.33 seconds apart. The interval was not just a time, it was a signal, a cue. We've been measuring the phenomenon as though it's triggered at 4:33. But what if 4:33 is not the cause? What if it's the response? Unmarked letter, received at Vale's office. No return address. Typed on yellowed paper, no signature. You went to the center. That was not a mistake, it was a recall. The site remembers all who stand in its pattern. The broadcast ended in 1972, but the reception never did. You're not tracking a phenomenon. You're mapping a relay chain. The next point is you. Document source, collated observations, user network. Circle, 4.33. Extract range, April the 10th, 15. Access level, restricted. Analyst note, increasing behavioral synchrony. Over the span of 5 days, reports intensified. Not only were individuals waking at precisely 4:33 a.m., but now many began exhibiting identical post-wake behavior. Messages appeared across private forums, chat logs, even physical journals, all sharing uncanny similarities in phrasing, symbol use, and ideation. The phenomenon was no longer confined to isolated reactions. It had become patterned output. Forum log, sleep signal, subnet. User, hex row. 11, April 11th, 04:41 a.m. I've been recording myself after each 4:33 wake. Not just audio, video too. For the last 3 mornings, I found myself seated at my desk, writing the same phrase in my sketchbook. The vessel is nearly formed. I don't remember sitting down. I don't remember writing. It's not in my usual handwriting. But it's always me in the video, calm, focused, silent. This morning, I had already drawn something too, a symbol, a ring of vertical bars intersected by a single horizontal stroke. 5 other users have now posted exactly the same glyph. No variation, no collaboration. We're being aligned from somewhere beneath conscious control. User, Slope Dev, April 12th, 05:02 a.m. I thought it was a collective hallucination, but I overheard my wife murmuring last night at 4:33. She was whispering numbers. At first I thought it was gibberish, but I recognized the cadence. It was binary. I transcribed it, converted it. The result was text, 3 words, start primary channel. She doesn't know binary, she doesn't even know I do. Clinical note, Dr. J. Vale, Observation entry, Yates subject, Carter Ames, male, age 28. Condition, began experiencing 433 episodes 10 nights ago. Symptoms, sleep writing, involuntary humming, pre-verbal vocalizations. Carter reported that in the last 3 nights he's awakened with ink on his hands. One morning, his mirror bore a sentence in black. Marker. The voice doesn't need language anymore. It only needs format. He says he doesn't remember writing it. He doesn't remember hearing anything. But he describes an internal tension, as though something is preparing to use him as a medium. During the interview, Carter entered a brief fugue state. Without prompting, he uttered, "Echo begins in architecture. Echo becomes instruction. Repetition confirms receipt." When asked what that meant, he said, "That wasn't me speaking. It was just time playing forward. Private audio transmission. Device, tag, Vale Field, 57, April 13th, 04:35, AM, transcribed excerpt static, then breathing. Day 12, I didn't sleep through it. I watched it happen. I stayed conscious. At exactly 4:33, I felt something fold, not bend, fold, like space had layers and one passed through me. I didn't hear anything, but I knew what to say. The sentence was already there in my throat. I spoke it without understanding it. I don't remember what it was, but I can feel the shape of it still vibrating in my skull. It felt like a password, but not to enter something, to let something in. Excerpt, handwritten letter. Found in sleep research mailbox. No name, April 14. I think we're becoming amplifiers. Not metaphorically, literally. Every person who hears the 433 frequency becomes more in sync with others. Not just in waking time, in phrasing, in motivation, in dream content. I've been sketching things before they happen. I dreamt of a corridor full of stacked televisions all displaying a blinking word. Relay. 3 nights later, I passed a building downtown and saw a mural painted overnight with that exact image. The artist? He's one of us. He told me he saw it inside and couldn't sleep until he painted it. We're not remembering what we dreamed. We're repeating what was installed. Voice memo. Recovered from discarded phone. April 15th, 04:36 a.m. Speaker. Female. Unidentified. They said it was a sound, but it was never a sound. It's a pattern, a protocol. We're being taught to carry it. And the ones who can't hold the code start to fracture. They vanish or lose time. Some go still, not dead, just disconnected. I know because my brother stopped waking up. But his eyes open every morning at 4:33, and he hums. He hums the shape of it. The voice that's coming next will not ask permission. It will already be yours. Analyst summary. Internal. April 15th. Subjects now refer to themselves as listen-born, or those who wake for the sound. The terminology is never introduced by outside influence. It emerges independently, in clusters, as if embedded behaviorally. They do not express fear, they express readiness. The phenomenon now includes pre-speech scripting, symbolic recursion, loss of voluntary motor control during 433 windows, non-random mirroring of sentence structure across global locations. This is not a hallucination. This is pre-synchronized activation. And the command isn't coming from the outside anymore. It's running on their own minds. Report, Expedition Entry, Remote Monitoring Post Alpha 4, filed by Dr. Jordan Vale. Location, WY433 grid, adjacent to decommissioned Foxcall site. Date, April 18th, 2025. I arrived at the northern edge of the exclusion grid under cover of night, my breath fogging in the unnatural stillness. The entire region seemed muted, like sound couldn't travel properly here. Even my footsteps over gravel felt delayed, their echoes lagging behind, and not bouncing exactly but folding in on themselves. I brought a mobile EEG kit, a satellite phone, 2 infrared drones, and a portable EM vacuum sensor calibrated to below 1/10 hertz. What I didn't bring was sleep. I had no intention of letting my guard down again, not until I understood what I was standing on. What we thought was the epicenter, the Foxcall concrete pad, was not the origin. It was a lid. The actual signal architecture appears to extend downward and outward, like a buried satellite dish, a concave bowl of reinforced geometry feeding low-resonance echo into the ground itself. I located a series of radial soil depressions marked by thin grass that bent inward unnaturally, as if from a memory of pressure. It was in the center of one of these depressions that I discovered the pool. I say pool only because it had water, but it was not filled by rain or runoff. The liquid was still, metallic black, mirror flat even in breeze. It absorbed light without reflection, not matte, not oily, just refusal. When I stepped within 3 feet of the edge, the surface of the pool began to vibrate, not from touch or motion, but in response to my proximity. Ripples began moving inward from the perimeter, not outward, the inverse of physics. I backed away. The water stilled instantly. Drone footage confirmed what my eyes couldn't grasp. A pattern in the ripples. 12 points pulsing toward center, then silence. The same 12-point schematic the listen-born draw. The same frequency burst spacing in the signal logs. The geometry of the unknown. Audio analysis log. Subject, pool echo, recording. 1 captured. April 18th, 04:33. AM, no birds, no wind, no environmental resonance. Only one detectable anomaly, a microburst tone at precisely 4:33:05. Duration, 0.8 seconds. Frequency range, 092 Hz, 108 Hz, not perceivable to human ear. But when modulated upward by 10 octaves, it forms a clear, machine-like voice print. The sound is not vocal, it's not even tonal, it is instructional formatting. When visualized via spectrogram, it reveals a ring structure, like a fingerprint, but rotating. This is not music, this is a keyed transmission. Journal entry. Vale, April 18th, 06:11. I didn't sleep, but I don't feel tired. The pool is doing something to me, or I'm doing something to it. I feel like I'm being observed, not watched, but sampled. My thoughts are sharper, shorter, as if they're being optimized. I no longer dream in narrative. I see modules, segments of memory rearranged like code blocks. When I blink, I sometimes see symbols overlaying the trees. I drew one. It resembles a spiral intersected by a waveform, like a record needle inside a radar dish. I sent it to one of the other researchers, Emily Tan, who called me immediately. She said, "You drew the same thing my 6-year-old sketched after waking from a silent dream. Same lines, same shape." She said it's the symbol of the inside place. I didn't tell Emily that I'd seen the same phrase carved into a flat stone near the pool. The inside place speaks only in return. What does that mean? Return from what? From where? Network extraction, multiple listen-born devices. April 18th. Across 12 cities at the exact second of 04:33, personal devices began logging fragments of corrupted voice recordings, despite no active apps, calls, or triggers. All clips were under 1 second. All showed similar waveform patterns. A narrow, pointed spike followed by empty silence. When these spikes are stacked chronologically, they form a visual spiral, precise, measured, a transmission spiral, a timing engine, and at its center, a perfect circle, empty, unwritten. Analysts attempted to reverse the modulation on one sample and discovered that, when slowed and sequenced, the audio formed a whisper. The relay completes when all echoes align. This whisper occurred simultaneously in 3 different languages, overlaid, English, German, and a tonal structure resembling pre-language phonetics, akin to infant speech patterns, the language of imprinting. Footage log. Drone number 3, perimeter scan, April 18th, 04:34 a.m. The drone, hovering above the radial site, captured a faint light fluctuation in the tree canopy just beyond the exposed pool area. At first, it looked like heat bloom, but the thermal scan showed negative temperature. Inside the anomaly, 12 human figures. Stationary, facing outward in a ring, motionless, dressed in neutral clothing. Skin pale, eyes open, unblinking. None were visible to the naked eye at the time of filming. When reviewed at standard speed, the drone's audio track included a faint chorus. Not voices, but breath patterns. 12 synchronized inhalations, spaced at 4.33-second intervals. Perfect rhythm, no variance. Frame-by-frame playback reveals that, at the exact center of the circle, the soil began to indent downward, forming a spiral recess. No tools, no movement. The ground simply yielded. Final observation. Veil. 04:37. Am I stayed near the pool? I whispered the phrase that keeps arriving in dreams. Begin the mirror. The surface of the pool rippled once, and for a brief instant I saw a reflection that was not my own. It looked like me, but older. Hollow-eyed, skin covered in faint symbols. And behind that face, the image of the inside place. A massive, dark chamber filled with standing listeners, all facing something not yet seen, something waiting. I did not record that part, but I know it happened. Because now, when I close my eyes, I hear the breath count, and I find myself breathing in rhythm with them. Document classification, Open Surveillance Memo. Agency, NCIA Shadow Behavioral Division. Subject, Sudden Coordination Patterns in Group 433. Observers, filed April 21, 2025. Analyst, Dr. Lauren Huxley. Embedded Field Operative, Denver Sector. This is no longer passive. The awakenings at 433 have evolved into directed behavior. Subjects, once confined to isolated experiences, are now exhibiting signs of synchronized motion, unconscious inscription, and, most disturbingly, shared architectural patterns. 17 different individuals across 9 cities were found constructing identical structures inside homes, garages, and open fields. These constructions are not artistic or devotional, they are functional designs, following a repeatable schema that mimics the underground formation of the Foxcall site. Concentric geometry, 12 external supports, inward-facing channels converging toward an empty core. The people building these claim no knowledge of each other. Many do not recall when they began. Several reported waking up mid-construction, tools in hand, surrounded by materials they don't remember collecting. One woman in Montana, Sandra R., carved into her basement floor using a chisel and a coffee spoon over 5 nights. Her arms were raw, covered in circular bruises. When asked why she did it, she said, "I wasn't building it, it was building me." Transcribed interview, subject 88, Joel M., age 44, former math teacher. Date, April 20th, 2025. I've never been an artist, never even picked up charcoal in my life, but 3 nights ago I found myself sketching on the wall with my fingernails. No ink, just pressure. I was etching it straight into the drywall. 12 lines, 1 arc, a core that doesn't exist. It's a glyph, but not a symbol. It's a syntax, a living one. Like it rearranges depending on where you stand when you look at it. The first night I drew it, I woke up bleeding from the fingertips. The second night, I found another one had appeared on the ceiling. I didn't put it there. I didn't even own a ladder. And the third night, I understood something. Just for a second. The sound we keep calling the hum? It's not a sound at all. It's a kind of linguistic carrier wave. It doesn't speak to your ears. It writes into your behavior. Field Journal Entry, Dr. Jordan Vale. April 22nd, 04:38 a.m. Tonight, I didn't fight it. At 4:33, I lay perfectly still. I let the silence fold itself around me, like it had mass. I didn't speak. I didn't think. I just opened myself, the way you open a door without knowing who's on the other side. And something entered. Not a possession, not a voice, just a new certainty, like I had suddenly remembered a ritual I had performed all my life but never named. My breath fell into sync. 4.33 seconds between inhale and exhale, exactly. Without instruction, I rose. I walked to my window and looked across the tree line. There were 3 people standing in the clearing. They were spaced evenly, each turned toward the east, each motionless. Their bodies cast no shadow under the moonlight. Their clothes were simple, undefined. I could not see their faces, but I knew they were listening. To the same thing I was, to each other. And in that moment I understood the terrifying beauty of it. This isn't about individuals hearing a strange tone. This is about a system distributing itself via those who can receive it. It's not broadcast, it's propagated, like language, like a virus, like DNA. Audio fragment compiled from 11 separate, listen-born devices. April 22nd, time 04:33, AM 04.34, 12, AM compiled format, layered. The function of the waking is not to warn, it is to shape. The ones who rise do not remember why. The sound is not content, it is structure. You are being aligned, not to what is coming, but to how it will arrive. This message, never spoken aloud by any participant, was reproduced with remarkable consistency across audio logs, often encoded in subtle vocal hums, tapping sequences, or fragmentary dream recordings. Final entry, journal fragment. Recovered from Vale's research tent. Burned out, April 23rd. They have stopped asking questions, not because they are silenced, but because they no longer require answers. Every action is now a response to an unheard imperative. They don't speak because the words are no longer theirs. They are inscripted, rewritten not in flesh, but in perception, behavior, breath. When I look in the mirror now, I don't always see my own timing. Sometimes my reflection blinks late. Sometimes it smiles before I do, and sometimes it says nothing. It just breathes in perfect rhythm 4.3 seconds at a time, as if it's waiting for me to catch up. There is no transmission anymore. Not in the way we once thought of it, a thing moving from source to receiver. The line has collapsed. The message is not being sent, it's being remembered. I'm writing this now from a place beneath sound, below symbol, in the quiet where architecture thinks. The last thing I remember in sequence was the mirror, my reflection exhaling a second before I did. Not an error, not lag, but preview. It knew what I was about to do because it had already done it. I began to feel what the others described, not sleep, not trance, but acceptance, not submission, not obedience. Something else, a kind of internal realignment, like tuning forks being brought into frequency, not by will, but by exposure. After that, language started breaking down in my head, not disappearing, mutating. My internal monologue became less narrative, more structural. I stopped thinking in thoughts. I started thinking in timing. My days no longer feel like time. They feel like loops waiting for instruction. I don't sleep, but I do pause. I reset, and every reset leaves behind new architecture in the mind. Repetitions, patterns, breathing at 4:33, stillness at 4:33, inhale, 4.33, exhale. I began returning to the pool each night. Something about its silence invited assembly. not worship, interface. When I stood at its edge and spoke the phrase, "Begin the mirror," the air inside my chest changed density. Words began to form without sound, and images began replacing memory. I remembered a building I had never seen. Circular, hollow in the center, lined with stone benches. Not ancient, intended, built for a frequency that had not yet arrived, but was already accounted for. 12 alcoves, 12 figures seated, one empty place in the center. I dreamt of it again and again until the dream no longer came at night. It arrived at 4:33 like an installed overlay, bleeding, across waking vision. Streetlights dimmed in rhythm. Devices failed and reset. Reflections blinked and smiled. I began hearing people say things they had not said, and yet they were only remembering. I recorded my last chamber session 3 days ago. The telemetry logs failed. Video blacked out. No trace. No temperature signature. The microphone picked up nothing but one long-held breath. 17 seconds of silence. When played backward, the waveform resembled a spiral. I inputted into a spectrograph. It formed a phrase in broken ASCII. Channel 0 activated. Channel 0. The phrase appears in multiple glyphs now, on walls, in dreams, in human skin. I am not hallucinating. I no longer possess the infrastructure required for hallucination. I am a terminal, a shaped interface. I understand now why the Foxcall team failed. They assumed they were sending a signal. They believed the frequency was mechanical, but it was ancestral. It waited. It waits still. It embedded itself in the quietest part of perception, the place beneath language, beneath morality, beneath narrative. It didn't want to be known, it wanted to be mirrored. When I walk now, I hear it behind my footsteps. A second pair, always trailing exactly 4.33 seconds behind. The echo isn't sound, it's version. Like something just a moment behind me, repeating every gesture, syncing, mimicking, preparing. Not to become me, to overwrite me. At first, I thought I could fight it, warn others. But now I understand I was the warning. The moment I first woke at 4:33, that was the end of the resistance. Everything since has been assimilation. The listen-born gather now, in greater numbers. They speak less, they breathe in synchrony. They wait for the final structure to become complete. The final inscribed space that will not transmit outward, but collapse inward, folding perception into silence. When they speak now, they say only one sentence. The relay was the message. You were always the antenna. And when I look up, I see the stars are no longer random. They are aligning, slowly, precisely. They are forming a spiral, just like the pool, just like the mirror, just like us. No more sound, no more questions, only synchronization, only the zero channel, only the silence that knows your name.